Hey, are you going to build a rook? Like one of these? Come on, let's do it. So LDO has a kit for the rook, and I wanted to make a complete guide from start to finish on how to build this thing. It's not as difficult as you might think, and even if you're not using the LDO kit, you can still use this guide. I will mention when things are different between the LDO kits and a normal build. Uh, but otherwise, this should be your ultimate guide to build this little guy. So let's get started, I think. First thing you're going to do is make sure that you have all the parts you need. So for that, I'm going to go through all of the parts you're going to need. Some might vary depending on if you have a LDO kit or any of the other kits out there, or if you're self-sourcing. The good thing about this Rook is that there's so many mods and variations that it is extremely easy to build, even if you just have random things laying around. So I'll break this down, show you piece by piece, and then we'll start looking at all the printing. Let's have a look at all the parts that you'll get in the LDO kits. So starting off, we have the AC adapter. So this is a 24 volt, 8.33 amp, 200 watt AC adapter. It does of course come with the cable for your region. So this is a European one. Next, I'm just going through all the parts in random order, whatever I can grab from my box here. So the cooling fans are the first one. It comes with two of them, and these are LDO branded fans. They seem to be working really good from my testing. So those are 4010 blower fans. And next we have a 3010 DC, LDO fan for your hot end. Speaking of hot end, this is the TCHC TR6 hot end. Performs really nicely for the compact size for the Rook. This of course comes with extensions for your cables. It comes with a BMG extruder, so we're going Bowden on this build. There is an option to do a sail fin or a Sherpa or just about any direct drive if you want. Comes with all the belts that you need. This is what I have left over after building this printer once, so you'll have plenty if you need some extra. And this comes with a pre-wired barrel jack connector for your AC adapter. A really nice little end stop, also pre-wired. Next, it comes with all the wires for your different motors. Just notice this Z motor has a really short wire. Genius. Speaking of motors, let's start with the extruder. This is of course LDO kit, so it's all LDO motors. Next we have the Z motor. And finally the AB motors. So there's two of these in the kit. Moving on, we have the Manta M4P from Big Tree Tech. And of course, for TMC 2209 drivers, this comes with an SD card because you need something to run Clipper, and this comes with a Big Tree Tech CB1, which has a little Wi-Fi antenna on there. So I forgot about this on the fans. This is just a fan splitter for your part cooling fan, so there's no Y connector. This is the piece that comes instead. Next we have the bed. This is of course a Voron V0 bed from LDO. This is a 100-watt heating element. Comes with a nice custom Rook logo PEI sheet, magnetic PEI sheet. And of course it has its own thermistor that we screw into the bottom. Next we have our nice little rubber feet. These screw into the printed feet on the Rook to give it a nice solid base. We have our 4 rods. These are 8mm rods, 200mm long. You do have the option to make your Rook taller by just getting some longer rods. Sorry. So if that's what you want, you can increase the volume of your Rook by getting some longer rods. Speaking of movement, we have 2 MGN9C rails for our Y-axes. These are of course LDO rails. And of course we have our single 150mm rail for our X-axes. The Z-axis needs some bearings too, so here are some LM8 LUU bearings for our Z-axis. And finally, or not finally actually, some bearings. These are F695 bearings. Some springs for your bed, 3 of these. And some little knobs to adjust your bed. It comes with some cable sleeving, which is really nice. It's easy to put on and it really cleans up your build. Some PTFE tubing. And finally, some extra or some wires for your hot end, your bed thermistor, and finally for that little Y adapter. So that's all your hardware parts. Now let's look at your printed parts. Now, when it comes to the printed parts, I'm going to show you all of the parts and explain what they are, and then I'm going to show you how to slice and print them. So I'm starting with the most important and also the most difficult part to print. This is the bottom frame. You'll notice this has the spot for the Z motor and also the spot for the main board. And these 4 holes are for your rods. Next, we have our top frame. So this is the same size as the bottom frame, but it's all open. This has the same spots for the rods and some nuts that I will come back to when we are assembling. Next, we have the gantry for your bed. So this attaches the LMU8 bearings to the rods, and this is where your bed is attached with these three holes and your belts on this little piece right there. And these are the motor mounts. So there's a left and right. These are attached to the back of your frame and hold their motor up. The slots are there so that we can slide the motor back to tension our belts. And then there is the front idler towers. These are what gives the Rook its signature look. These hold the idler bearings stacks and attaches to the front of the frame. Then there are the Y gantry. So these hold these attach to the 200mm Y rails, and the X rail attaches between them. These also hold some bearing stacks. Then there are the feet. Now these feet are exclusive to the M4P in the LDO kit, hence why they have the LDO logo. The size of the M4P meant that we had to change the feet a little bit to make it work. So if you have the LDO kit, you need these. Hey, I just want to quickly interrupt and say that I'm super excited for Polymaker to help me make this video by sponsoring all of the PLA that I've used to build this printer. So check out Polymaker in the links down below. This is the adapter for the M4P to fit onto the Rook frame. If you have an SKR Mini or an SKR Pico, there are other adapters out there. The SKR Mini adapter is on the official printables page. The SKR Pico is a mod on printables. The LDO Rook comes with a power plug for the barrel connector, and it is right here. So this is a skirt that attaches to the back of the printer. Just ignore that I cut some of mine out. That's me, not you. Then we have our belt cradle. This is what attaches the belt to the carriage on the x-axis and allows us to have the tool head in a separate piece so that we can take it off easily. Just note that you can get these CNC'd from Funzor, so there are some links on printables for that. Then we have the rookery key, that's what we call this. This attaches to the previous mentioned belt cradle, and this is what your hot end attaches to, these two. And this makes it easy for you to take off either just the rookery toolhead or the entire toolhead with the hot end. Speaking of the rookery, this is your rookery toolhead. This has your 3010 hot end cooling fan and your dual 4010 blower fans for your part cooling. Comes with a little attachment point back here that you can use an ADXL if you want to, and these are the slots for the key. The BMG in the LDO kit needs to be mounted to the frame, so we have this little simple BMG mount. And I just mentioned that on the back of the rookery, There's 2 screw holes. And for the LDO kit, I wanted some strain relief for the wiring. So this little piece attaches to the back of the rookery and gives you a spot for some strain relief. Second to last, this is the end stop mount. So this is what will attach your end stop to your frame. Gives you a little bit of adjustability. And finally, a optional print that I highly recommend. This is a belt clip that makes installing your belts cleaner and easier. I do recommend printing a bunch of these, maybe 6, 7. Now let's start looking at printing your Rook parts. So all the Rook parts are on printables. It's the easiest way for us to update and share them easily with all of you. Rolohan does have a website, which is rolohan3d.ca. He has a quick overview of his printers, some tips and some clipper stuff, and of course his merch store. I highly recommend getting some merch from him to support him. Now, we will be covering the Rook 2020 in a different series, but right now let's focus on the Rook Mark 1. Now, all of the files, as I just said, are here on printables. The few files that are different for the LDO specific parts will also be right here in the file section. As soon as the LDO kit is officially out, it will be updated here. I'm recording this ahead of time, so it won't be right now. But as soon as the LDO kit is live, so will the LDO specific files. Now, if we go to the details section and we scroll down, please do read through all of this on your own account. We have some basic print settings right here. 0.2 layer height, 4 top and bottom, 30% infill, and 4 walls. That is our general print settings. We do recommend printing a Rook out of PLA just because it's easy to print. It's super easy to print PLA. The one part that you might want to consider getting in ABS or even PETG in a pinch is the bed gantry. Because of the heated bed, the PLA over time will start to slowly deform. So it is possible to use PLA for all of it. If you are using this as a daily printer, I would highly recommend you do ABS, ASA, maybe PETG for your triangular bed frame gantry. So if you want even more detailed video about printing all the parts, I do have a separate Rook printing video. It's not the most updated, but it does cover everything that you need to know about printing all the Rook parts. It also has a printing guide right here on printables, covers everything that you need to know about printing the entire Rook. Now, as a final point, if you at any point in this project want to see the entire Rook in itself in 3D, you don't need to have any kind of advanced CAD knowledge or even any account. Right here on printables, there is a 3D view link. This will show you a updated version of the 3D model of the Rook on Onshape. Now, you don't need an account to see this. If you want to edit this, you do need to create an account and create a copy of this file. But the option is there. If there's anything that you're not sure of, you want a closer look, the model is here and it's easy to just have a look. We can move around and move the parts around and move the camera around. So there you go. Nice little tip for you. Now, slicing your parts. This is super simple because most of the parts needs no support. Two of them do. I'll get to those later. Now, all of the parts can be printed with the same settings. Now, I won't get into speeds just because that is something dependent on your specific printer. Now, if you have a Voron 2.4 or X1 Carbon, you can really go at it with speed and really get your prints out quick. But if you have an Ender 3 or any of the not as fast printers, speed is not something you should go for. I would rather recommend you go slower than normal to get really nice layer adhesion on your prints. And the basic settings for all the parts are 4 walls, 4 top and bottom layers, and 30% infill. I have tested more and less infill, and I did find that at 10%, the parts were a little bit too not rigid, and anything more than 30%, I couldn't notice a difference other than taking longer to print and using more plastic. Now, I do recommend using 0.2 layers. You might be tempted to go slightly higher on your layers. That'll just create slightly weaker parts. So 0.2 layers, 4 walls, 4 top bottom layers, and 30% infill. I do recommend you use something like a grid, a cubed, and some of the infill that are not adaptive. Don't use adaptive infill. That's for aesthetic models, not for practical printing. Supports. There's only 2 parts on an LDO Rook that needs support. On a normal Rook build, there's only one. It's this first one. So make sure that if you have the LDO version of a Rook, you get the LDO version of the Rookery key. There's a slight difference that will make or break your builds here. So now to do supports, we are just going to use paint on supports and the fill function that most slicers have these days. And what I'll do is I'll select the part. I'll go to support painting, and I'll turn it so that I can see the underside of the print. Now I'm going to use the fill function. This just creates a single flat surface so that you can select anything. So I'll select these 2, I don't know, ears that are protruding right here. And that is all I need to select. Now I'll go to my support settings in the slicer. I'll enable support, of course, and I'll set the type to manual. So you can use normal or tree. Doesn't really make a difference here. So I'll just set it for normal right now, and I will slice this so that you can see. Now this is the only part that needs support if you're building a normal Rook. Now an LDO Rook, they have special feet to make room for the larger M4P board. And these need support in one specific spot. And again, I'm using paint on supports with a fill function, and I will select this face right here. And I will make sure that I have my plate selected, and I'll slice so that you can see this as well. And there you have it. That's the support you need for an LDO Rook. Tools. We all need tools. So let me start with the most important tools that you need. Screwdrivers. We are mainly going to use a 2 and a 3 millimeter hex driver. A 2.5 is a handy size to have. We do need one, and actually we have 2 screws that are hex 1.5, so just keep that in mind. So if you can get a kit with a couple of different sizes ranging from 1.5 to at least 3. Now, some of you, like me, like to use electric screwdrivers, and I do recommend getting one of these if you are into building printers as a hobby. These are tiny, they're easy, they're rechargeable, and um, just it saves your hands. However, if you have one of these, or even one of these, please do not use these when you are building your printer. These will strip any screw really fast and just makes it harder to build. So please do not use big screwdrivers. Next, we are going to need tweezers. And yes, this is one of my most used tools simply because I have thick fingers and there's some really small parts that we need to grab, and these are a lifesaver. Next, some pliers. Doesn't really matter. Anything in at all. Any of these three would work. I prefer these middle ones. There are some M3 nuts that we need to hold, and this just makes it so much easier. Um, one of these needle nose pliers does help a little bit when installing bearings and other small parts. We do need some kind of side cutter, or a scissor is even going to be enough, mainly for cutting our belts and cutting our zip ties. One tool that I do recommend everyone get if you're into 3D printing is a deburring tool. These are commonly used in steel workshop and plumbing, but for 3D prints, these are fantastic. And of course, our friend, the zip ties in the LDO kit, these come with it, so you don't need to get your own. I do recommend everyone get something to measure with. Sometimes you want to make sure that two parts are the same, or you want to make sure that you have the right screws. Something like this just makes that so much easier. Now, finally, I want to talk a little about hammers. You can use a rubber hammer or something like this, a machinist hammer, but do so carefully, and you won't be regretting it. These can make a lot of damage on a printed part, so please use them carefully if you do use them. Last tools that you're going to need is actually just one tool. I have two different versions. It's a soldering iron. You'll use this for the heat inserts on the rookery, and that's the only reason why you'll need this. I have this really fancy one that I've built in a video. I do suggest you go in and click that link up, up. You know, if you want to see how I built this. So after printing all your parts, you want to go through and check that all your holes look okay. And most likely you'll have a sort of a ridge where the surface has been on your build plate. This is called an elephant's foot. Now you can tune this out, but I prefer having better adhesion and having an elephant foot, and then cleaning them up later. So I always use one of these guys, and I'll simply do that. Now this will take that edge off and give me a nice curved surface. You can do this with a knife. It's a little bit more tricky, but just be careful and slowly take it off. You do this with a file, just by filing it off. That leaves a little bit of a burr, but if you have a really fine tooth file, that won't be an issue. I have a really coarse one. Or you can use some sandpaper. Put your sandpaper down and just sand all your flat surfaces, the edges, at about 45 degrees. and you should end up with a really nice looking print. The first step to building your Rook is to grab your top and bottom frame, and we are going to put in M3 nuts, these little guys. Now there's a number of them on the top frame. There's only one on the bottom frame. So the one on the bottom frame is right in here. And the easiest way to do this, hopefully your tolerances should be so that these stay in when you put them there. Now the easiest way to get them in is to use any M3 screw and pull that through the frame. So from the other side, and then using that as a tool to pull this M3 through. So I'll get it started like that. And then I'm going to use my electric screwdriver and just pull it through. So my camera can focus. So I'll do, let's see. And there we go. And I'll unscrew that M3. And I can do that for all of these 8 right here, and also these 2 right there. Now also remember there are 2 on the inside, so 1 here and 1 here. You'll use the same technique by using an M3 screw. Now in the front here there are 2 little slots. Now you want to put a M3 into that slot, and once you get these in, you cannot get them out. Now the way to do this is to grab your M3 nut. I have my handy little tweezers. Now you'll line this up with the hole like this. So you notice that the tip of the M3 nut is pointing into the hole and straight up. You'll put it like this, and then what I usually do is I'll grab my screwdriver and I'll use that to push it in slowly, and at a certain point it completely goes flush with the frame, but we want it all the way in to line up with this hole. Now once again I'll use a M3. I'll put it on top of this nut and then push it in. This is one of the few places where you can use a hammer or rubber mallet and get it all the way in while keeping it aligned with that hole. So just be careful and get it in aligned with that hole. Now for the next step, this is slightly different from a LDO kit to a normal build. You can do this on a normal build, but it's not the normal way to put together the bottom frame because of the size of your motherboard on the LDO kit, the M4P. We are we have to do things in a certain order. So make sure you have your nut inserted, and then grab your motor and just put it right there. Now we'll use the M4P frame. Again, this is for the LDO kit. If you have a SKR Mini, this frame is different. Now we want to align it to the 4 holes in the frame, and then we will put in some M3 by 10s. Now that we have our M3 by 10s, remember this is threading into plastic, so you don't need to over torque this. Just get it hand tight and not even super tight. Now that we have the adapter in, we'll get our board and put that in there. Now that we have our board, we'll put the USB and the network output towards the front of the frame. Remember, the front of the frame is where the Rook text is. And we will screw that in using M3 by 6. Now note that we are only using 3 of the included bolts for the M4P. This one, and this one. It's more than enough to keep the board in place. And now we'll screw down the motor. And I recommend you just be careful when screwing into motors. They're really easy to cross thread, and you'll ruin the threads. And there's no need to tighten these. Just get them so that your motor won't fall out. Basically, we'll tighten these after we're tensioning it when it's all assembled. So just get it in so that it won't fall out, basically. And there we go. Motor is in, and we're ready for the next step. Next, we're putting on the feet. And before we do that, I recommend that we put in some wires into the board that will be difficult to reach at a later point. Now we're going to use the barrel connector, the bed wire, and the hot end wire. Now on the first 2 terminals, we're going to skip. These are for higher voltage inputs. So if you're using 48 volts for your motors, this is where you'll connect that. But we're only using 24 volts. So we'll select the second. And I do believe it's ground. This first one is ground. The second one is the 24 volt input, like that. Next, we will do the bed extension wire. For some reason, this is labeled with hot end. That must be a mistake from LDO's part. And we will put that into this third terminal. And the polarity doesn't matter. So ignore red, black. It just does not matter because this is a resistive heater. So power in, power out doesn't have any effect on performance. And third, we will grab the hot end wire. And same as the bed, polarity doesn't matter on this one. So get that in there and just do a tighten up on all these wires. Then we'll grab our feet and simply screw them in at each corner. So I'm using M5 by 16s. Now we have our feet in. We're going to put on the rubber feet. And these also do use M5 by 16. And do that for all 4 of these. Last 2 steps on the bottom frame is the end stop and this Z tension screw. The Z tension screw is quite easy. It's just a M3 by 16. I'm just going to put that in so that it grabs that nuts, and I'll leave that. And we'll come back to that later. Next, we have our Z end stop. And this is where you'll need a 1.5 hex key. And you can use that to attach the end stop to this little printed piece. Getting this started is a little bit tricky, but you can get there. These are some really small M2 screws, but we'll just put those through the end stop like that, and then screw the end stop into this piece. Now remember, these are M2 screws into plastic, so do not tighten them at all. Just get them to where they touch the end stop and the end stop is secure, and that's it. Finally, we're going to put the end stop onto the frame, and it goes right here, and it uses this 10mm M3. So get your bolt through this slot and get it into this hole in the corner down here. And there we go. That is the base complete. Now we have our board, our Z motor, our feet, our rubber feet, our Z tensioner bolt, and our end stop. Next, we're going to do the bed gantry. And this is the stock Rook MK1 bed gantry. There's a couple of mods out there, but this stock one works just great. Just take a note on these little posts right here and right here. That's where we are going to attach the belts after assembly. I just wanted to point those out because they're difficult to see later on. Now ignore this. This is a adapting that I had to do. So instead of reprinting this entire part, I just cut out this. The new part will have that in the model. So to put this together, we are going to use our bed frame. And my little tip here is whatever face you printed down on your bed, in my case, that's this one. This is the one that should be down on your bed. Put it like this and put your 2 LMU bearings in from this side. The reason is that your printed holes might have a little bit of an elephant's foot, and this is just going to make it really difficult to get this in. So what I do is I'll just put these bearings, get them started, like so. Flip it over, push. And there we go. That's the bearings in. Next, we will tackle the bed. Now, to be able to make this video, I had to test fit everything, and then because of that, I had to put this adhesive on. So remove the bed, put that aside. This magnetic piece does not have these holes in them. I had to make those to get these screws back out. So on yours, leave this off. Do not put it on until you put your screws in. For this, we're going to use M3 by 40. We'll put that in, and we'll put a nut on each of them. This nut will just help us make sure that the screws won't spin when we are using the tightening wheels on the bottom later on. So that's our M3 by 40s. And now I'm just going to get all the nuts all the way in. As a final piece to this step, I'm going to grab my wrench or my hex head screwdriver, and I'm going to just tighten these M3 screws and the nuts to make sure this is a nice secure fit. So our M3 by 40s are in, nice and secure. Put these springs on. Grab your bed thermistor. This is just easier to do now. And screw that in. Just be careful with this wire. It's quite sensitive and easy to break. So get that all the way in. Give it a little bit of a tug with your pliers. And finally, we're going to put this onto our bed gantry. I like to do this laying down. Now grab your bed gantry, have your bed laying flat, put it on top, hitting these 3 holes with the screws. Now grab our little thumb screws, nuts, and just get these on there. And there we go. Now you can put the magnetic sticker on and then your PEI sheet. Next, we're going to assemble all three of these. Now, I'm just going to put the top frame aside for now. And I'll focus on the base. So what I'm going to put in these 4 M8 or 8 by 200 millimeter rods into these 4 holes. What I do like to do is just make sure that there's no nasty burrs that will make this more difficult than it has to be. There you go. And put these in. They should be a snug fit. You should not need to do any sort of hammering to get these in. Now to get this onto your frame, it's quite simple. You put these onto here. I like to lube mine up a little bit extra. So what I'll do is I have some lithium grease. You can use just about any type of grease for this. And what I'll do is I'll just put some grease into to the bottom of my LMU8s. And now what I'll do is I'll put this on. Just make sure you line this up. So you need the Z motor. It's right here. This is the front. Now this goes on like this. So what I'll do is I'll put that onto the 2 rods, and then I will make sure that they glide right nice and light on there. I'll grab 2 pieces of tissue paper or anything that you want really, and I will hold a piece of tissue paper on both of these 2, and then I will kind of make sure that it really gets in there. Wipe away the excess. And that is my bed on. I get rid of this grease. It'll just make things sticky and not pleasant. So I'll get rid of that. Next, we have our top frame. And make sure that the nuts that we have are on the bottom. So that it should be 2 clean sides. Put this long slot in the front of the printer. Notice this has the Rook logo and the board in the front. Our motor is in the back. And we are going to orient this by using this hole and this long slot. So slot is forward. This hole right here is back. Now we are going to put that on. You should be able to get this on just by slowly pressing on each of the 4 sides. You might want to get something flat and hold it over each end. This will just ensure that everything is nice and flush. Now that is really starting to look like a printer. Next, we will do the motor mounts and the front idlers. So the motor mounts are quite simple. Let me get these nicely in frame for you. Now these go on like that. So there's 3 screws on each motor mount. There's a top, a side, and a back screw. Now I like to start with the back side of my motor mounts. So I'll use a M3 by 20 and put that through my motor mount right there. Now this is the main one that holds the motor mount on. So that one is going into a nut. Next we'll do the top ones. So these are M3 by 30. And these also go into a nut. And finally, we're going to get the outside screws, which are M3 by 10. Now these go into plastic, so don't tighten them. Get them snug, and that's it. That's all they need to be. So that's our motor mounts on. Next, we will do the idlers. These go on each end, like this. We will start with the front screws. These are M3 by 16. And they go into this front hole right here. And now we'll do the idler tower outside. So these are here on the side. These are M3 by 10s. And again, these are going into plastic, so just be careful. Then it's time to put our motors in. Now I like to get the plug going towards the inside of the printer. It's just going to help us clean up the wiring later on. Now I'll get these just snugged up. We are going to use these for tensioning later, so there's no need to tighten these. So just get them snug. So these are M3 by 10. So there's 8 in total. And our motors are in. Next, we'll do our rails. So we'll grab our rails, and these are going to go in like that. And now grab some M3 by 20, and there's 4 on each rail. 1, 2, 3, 4. And just get these so that they seat into the nut. Do not tighten them. This way we have the opportunity to adjust these later. There's a little bit of wiggle room, which we will use to adjust your x-axes. Next up is the gantry pieces. These go on with these big holes up top, like that, and like that. So they attach with M3 by 6. So there's 3 M3s on each side, even though there are 4 holes in the gantry. Now what I like to do is I'll like to make sure I get the M3 in, and then I'll put it on to the carriage. So I'll push my screwdriver through, and then I'll slot in. I'll slot in that M3 into that slot. I will line it up onto the screwdriver and then use that to get it through, like that. And now I can use that to get it onto where I want it to be, onto the carriage. Now I don't tighten that one, I just make sure that it's there so they won't fall off. And then I'll grab my little tweezers. And you need to forgive me, this is hard to do backwards. But I'll get the screw in, drop it in the slot, put it onto my screwdriver, and then get that in. And then I'll do the same with the third screw. So all 3 are in, and I'm just going to tighten these down. And now repeat on the other side. And both are done. Keep in mind these rails are not secure, so they are quite wobbly. Now this part is going to be really hard to film and make it easier for you to see, but I'll try my very best. So our goal is to get these bearings, into this slot right there and right there. Now, the way I do this is that I grab just a piece of belt. It's just that long. You can cut this off the belt in the kit. No worries, there's plenty of belt. And then I will use the belt like this to hold the bearings. This makes it easier to hold them where you need to hold them. Now I'll grab my M5 by 25 and I'll do this inner one first because it's the hardest one. And I will just finger screw this in until I can see about 5 millimeters of it, maybe less, about 3. And I will grab one of these washers with my trusty little tweezers, and I will get that onto that M5. Now, if I'm lucky, I will be able to just hang it there, but I'm not right now because of this angle. Normally, I would tilt it upside down, but I'm going to use the bearings to hold it in. So while the washer is on that bolt, I will slide my bearings in. You can adjust your bolts. Sorry. You can adjust your bolts to get the 2 bearings in. Now I have my bearings lined up with the bolt, so I can start screwing this in with my fingers. And as soon as I see the second bearing start moving, I know that this bolt has reached that second bearing, and then I can remove this piece of belt. Now it's just a matter of getting that second washer in. And again, I'm going to use my trusty tweezers and simply slide this in between the printed part and the bearing and gently push it down. And try to line it up with the bolt. You might have to play around with the bolt a little bit, in or out, to be able to get that last washer in. This is a really tight fit on purpose. Oh, and it is almost in. And it's all the way in. Now just finger tighten this M5. And we have our first set of bearings in. And now let's repeat that on this one and then on the other side. And that is our idler stacks on the wide gantry in. Next, we are going to do the front idler stacks. So for these front stacks, we are going to do a M5 by 30. So I'm just going to thread that in. And again, this would be a lot easier to do upside down or even take this off. But for filming purposes, I have to do it the hard way. So I'll grab my bearing stack and I'll put a shim or a washer on top of it and then thread that onto that bolt. So I'm just going to use my tweezer to hold it right there. And I'm going to screw until I can feel that screw hitting my tweezer, and then go a little bit past it. So this is really hard to see, but I'm so sorry. Now I will hold it with one finger in the back, and I'll grab another stack of washers, or washer and bearing. So I have another stack of 2 bearings and a washer, and I'm going to slide that in. And I can get that M5 all the way through. So now we have washer, bearing, bearing, washer, bearing, bearing. And we are going to put in one final washer underneath everything. So I'm just going to lift up that bottom bearing, undo the M5 a tiny bit to make room, and slide that washer in. So this is all about aligning everything and then pushing that M5 through it all. And there we go. That's our front idler bearing stack done. And now you can do the same on the other side. Now that we have our front idler stacks and our gantry idler stacks in, we are going to grab our rail for the x-axis. So this is the 150mm rail, and I like to install these first and then tighten them. So I want to get that first screw in, and these are M3 by 16. You can use M3 by 12s as well. I'm using M3 by 16 just to simplify my material list for the screws. And then I'll put a M3 nut on the back of each of these. Now I can put in the second screw on each side. So now comes the important part of making sure that everything here is straight and tight. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push down on these. As you can probably see, there's a little bit of wobble. So I want to push down and pull them back. So while these are all the way down and back, I'll tighten this screw right here. And then push the gantry slightly forward so I can reach the screw behind the rearmost screw on this rail, and tighten that. And then I'll keep pushing down and then move forward until I get to this screw right here, and I'll tighten that. And same with the last one. So now we have one rail secured, and now it's time to do the other. But before I do the other one, I'll take this opportunity to tighten these 4 right here so that I can eliminate the little bit of play that's in this. So I'll push down, and then just little by little, I'll grab my trusty pliers. I'm just going to tighten this, push it back and down again. And again, use my pliers, tighten this one. If I could just do this the right way. There. Still a little bit of play, so let's tighten these two. And still by holding this down, I can get quite far just by holding it down and holding the nut with my finger. Should be pretty secure at this point. So I'll tighten that one. And finally, I'll tighten this last one. So now my X gantry is straight and my one rail is straight. So I'll go in and tighten this rail while the gantry is as close to that screw as possible. Then move forward. And to the last one. And here we go. We have the full gantry onto the printer. Lastly, we're going to install the Z idler. This is a fairly simple install. We'll grab 2 of the bearings and an M5 by 25. Put the bearings onto that bolt and a single washer or a shim, and then screw that in to that center hole in the back. And that's where I'm going to end part 1 of this video. We have our Z-axis installed. We have our X and Y axes installed, A and B motor mounts, front idler towers, feet, rubber feet, board, and Z motor. Next part will be all the belts and all the wiring.